Welcome back everyone to LifePoint Church Online. We've got another great week ahead. If this is your first time joining us, a huge welcome to you. Thank you so much for connecting in with our church family here. A massive welcome to you. We're going to continue our series this week on hearing from God. We've got our very own Michael Gilliver who's prepared an awesome message for us. We're so excited to hear. Thanks, Michael.
We are talking, we're in a series called Whisper about hearing God's voice. And I thought I'd try and have a crack at one of the more difficult topics with regards to this. But I'll begin with a story. I've got 4 sons, foolishly or what. And my 4th son has significant special needs. He can't talk yet. He's 5 and completely non-verbal. But every time he comes home from school, he gets a bus to his door. It's fantastic. For all the problems that our country has, how great is it that special needs kids can get a lift from their school straight back to home? I think that's absolutely brilliant. Anyway, side note. He arrives at home and the first thing he wants to do, because he has to feed and he has to get plugged into feed, so it's a period of sitting down for a while. I'm really appreciative. This sounds like a really negative story. It's not. This is part of our life and it's fun. He then gets to decide what he wants to watch on TV. And because he can't talk, he has to communicate in his own way what he wants to watch for his TV show while he eats. And so he has developed his own sign language for all of the shows he really likes. So if he wants, there's one called Peter Rabbit. You might know Peter Rabbit, the movie. So he just does this. So that's Peter Rabbit. That's Peter Rabbit 2. There's a sequel, right? He also quite likes Wiggles, which is an easy one, like this, yeah. He quite likes Moana, which is this. He does that. You might see him do that one. He's after Moana at that point. He really likes a random movie with The Rock in it called Journey to the Mysterious Island. And there's a section in that where The Rock punches a giant lizard. And he does it like this. And this is Orson's signal for wanting to watch that movie. So he goes, takes his. How about we all do this because it's ridiculous, right? Put your hand up like this, and you got to slowly turn it into a fist. You go. And then a little jab. So that's his one for this is all legit. Is there any more? I feel like there's another one in there somewhere. Anyway, the point being, when he gets home, he's so excited because now he gets to watch his favourite movie, right? But he decides that he kind of wants to watch all of them. And so he comes in and he's just like... And it's like... There's another... Actually, the last one is he's really into Kung Fu Panda at the moment. And he hasn't worked out a particularly good signal for that, but he can make some noises. And it's so random. He's memorized the rhythm of the opening sequence. So he goes, which, you know, the logo. Anyway, so he can't pick. It's really hard to pick because there's so many good choices out there and he can't seem to pick the one that he wants to do. And I tell you that story because, you know, that's how a child has to struggle with decisions they need to make. You, as grown-ups, you have to make decisions quite regularly. It's one of the kind of core aspects of growing up is you've got to make decisions all the time. And sometimes they're really hard ones. Sometimes, we're going to talk about hearing God's voice in decisions today. And let's just be clear from the outset, if it's a choice between do the right thing or the wrong thing, God wants you to do the right thing, okay? That's a really easy one. But often we're confronted with options that are equally good or appear to be equally good or options that we don't know how they're going to go. And making the decision in those circumstances can be really hard. And often the time in our lives where we most wish we could hear God's voice is when there is a decision before us and we're not quite sure what to do. And as you get older and you look back and you start thinking about the things that in your life are going well and maybe the things that aren't going so well, how often can you trace that back to decisions you've made along the way that led you to that position? And in some ways, the older you get, the more you become aware of how critical decisions can sometimes be. Because the decision you make today and then tomorrow and the next day in 10 years' time could look a totally different way because you made the calls along the way. Decisions can be high-stakes situations, right? Like it's a big call. What's going to happen next? I don't know. I want to get this right. God, can you please show up for me because I need your wisdom. I need your guidance. That's what we're talking about today. I've made a fair few decisions in my lifetime. Maybe I'll share them through the talk. I can't remember. I'm not using notes today. We'll see how we go. But where I went to, a verse I found to be really helpful, and this is going to be a super practical message today, that helped me make better decisions. I'm going to share that with you today. I'm going to do it in chunks to break down all little bits, because the Bible often needs to be read in chunks to try and make sense of it all. And hopefully at the end of all this, you'll think, okay, that at least gives me some idea. Should you be facing a decision right now? So we're going to start in Ephesians chapter 5. It's only a couple of verses today. And this verse section begins with the phrase, be careful how you live. I've got a friend named Shane, and one of the things he does as a kind of a hobby is he paints miniatures, like those little models. And he's got the full setup, right? So he's got a table, there's his painting table. He's got like a magnifying glass so he can see what he's doing. He's got really fine paintbrushes. He's got a special light that shines in a particular way so there's no shadow or something like that. There's even like a little stand that you rest your wrist on so that you can have a steadier hand. And I tell you that because I think when we're talking about making good decisions, and this is what this is really talking about, the first exhortation here is to be careful. And that's what being careful is like, right? It's taking a great degree of care, paying really, really close attention. Put the other way, it's like, don't be careless. The opposite of being careful is to be careless. And carelessness is where you kind of, you take your hand, I don't know if you've done this before, maybe driving down a straight road, and you take the hands off the wheel to see kind of what happens. And for a while, it kind of works, and then eventually it starts to drift, and your partner says, grab the steering wheel, please. You're not impressing anyone. Being careless is taking your hands off the wheel. Being careless is deciding to not pay attention. Being careless is to think, I'll just leave it and hope it all works out. But God is saying when it comes to decision making, if you want to hear God's voice, you need to be taking care. You need to be paying attention. You need to kind of wake up. And then the back end of that verse says, because the days are evil, which is a bit of a full-on phrase, right? It almost sounds like the days are underneath your bed and they're going to come and get you. It's not saying it in that sense. Rather, it's more saying like that society, that culture, that time aren't on your side. They're not going to sort it out for you. They're not there to look out for what's best for you. They're not going to. So if you choose to say, okay, I need to make this decision and I don't want to, so I'm just going to not worry about it, I'm not going to think about it, I'm going to be a bit careless, then the days are going to win. Then time will have its way with you and you'll end up somewhere and it won't be the way that you wanted to go. That society will take you a certain direction and it wasn't the way you wanted to go, but you decided that you would leave control to the days, and the days didn't take you where you wanted to go. I've seen this in the lives of some of my friends. I know of a particular relationship breakdown that took place, and really, one of the primary reasons that happened is because he chose to just play computer games all the time. And on any given day, there's nothing particularly wrong with playing a game, is there? But you do that day in, day out for 4 or 5 years, kind of not really taking any care, and then all of a sudden the relationship was gone. I see it as I used to be a teacher, and I'd see kids on assessment due dates bawling their eyes out because they're not ready and they're going to fail, and it's like year 12 and it kind of matters a bit. And it's like, well, how did you get to this situation where you did no work? And it's like, well, I worked my part-time job and then I went and hang out with friends, and then I kind of just didn't do anything, and then I got on TikTok and just kept scrolling. I just kind of took my eyes off the road. I took my hands off the wheel. I stopped kind of caring, and it turns out that when that happens, the days aren't necessarily on your side. So be careful how you live. Wake up, pay attention, because life is actually quite hard and it's not fighting for you. It's not necessarily fighting against you intentionally. It's just kind of not on your team. It's not your supporter. It's not your cheer squad. The days aren't going to be supporting you if you are not paying attention. And so in the middle, it says, well, what do we do instead? And here's the phrase: be careful how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity. So pay attention. Life and time and society and culture is not on your side. It's not going to sort it all out for you if you kind of take your hand off the wheel. Instead, when it comes to making decisions, just ask yourself, what's the wise thing to do? Do the wise thing. And I appreciate that probably right now you're thinking that's a bit of a cop-out answer, because if I knew what the wise thing to do was, I would do that, right? Like that's the logical conclusion to come from, is saying, okay, so God's way of speaking to me in decisions is to say, just do the wise thing. Well, how do I figure that out? And I appreciate that, yeah, it kind of does sound like a cop-out, but I actually want to push back on that too and say it isn't. I think that wisdom is more within your grasp than perhaps you recognize. I've done this a couple of times, usually for my birthday, is I've gone deep sea fishing. I don't know if you've ever done, I quite like fishing. I find it really relaxing. And I've only done deep sea a few times. It's been really, really fun. This one time we were out super far, couldn't see land or any of those things. And I got this really big one. It was just the best day of my life sort of situation. And the rod was over and you had to haul the thing up, right? And it was fighting like crazy. Now, I mean, I'm pretty cut, but I'm not super cut, right? And I'm reefing this thing up. You know how like sometimes you get a cramp and it just hurts, right? And they're annoying. And sometimes you get a cramp that feels like it's permanently disfiguring your body. Like it's changed the angle of how that part's supposed to now go. I got those in my biceps. I'd never had that before in my life. So I'm there going like this, and then all of a sudden, like, I can't move anything. And I'm like standing there. And I'm with strangers, and they're all looking at, who's this weird guy who doesn't know how to reel up? Anyway, and I kind of relax it down again, and then I go again. And because it was so deep, it hurt an awful lot to get the thing up, right? It was an embarrassing experience, kind of worth it. I do want to have a go at catching one of those really big fish one day, you know, like the sports fishing thing, but I'm afraid that if I ever have a crack, I'll only be able to get it in a little while, and then my whole body will seize up and I won't be able to do it. Here's the point of that story. Deep things are hard to get out, right? Now, there's this book of the Bible, it's called Proverbs. It's full of all this great stuff about what we're talking about today. And what it says in this particular verse is when it comes to finding wisdom, hearing God's voice, and God's voice is saying to you, do the wise thing, where do I get the wisdom from? The first place is from within yourself. So here's Proverbs 20, verse 5. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. It's going to be hard to draw out of you the wisdom that is buried deep within. It's deep waters are difficult places to get to. That's because they're deep. But when you're faced with decisions to make, and you can see the merits and the not merits of all of the options and all this sort of stuff, right? Part of what you need to do is deeply analyze yourself to work out, why do I want what I want? Why am I thinking this is the way? What deep need within me am I trying to meet by making this decision? What fear is deep within me that is causing it to be hard for me to make a call? Deep self-analysis to understand how you have been made, what makes you tick, what parts of the law of God that are written on your hearts are really resonating for you at that moment. That is deep, hard work. It's going to seize you up. It's going to be a pain in the neck. You're probably going to lose a bit of sleep over it because you're tossing and turning, trying to work it out. But that is where wisdom is found. Wisdom is found in deep, hard analysis of yourself. And I would suggest that oftentimes, when we look back to terrible decisions that we've made, it's not because there was no wisdom to be found. If you'd done the work, you could have found it. Sometimes it's just within us. God literally says, dig deep and there's insight. You can draw it out. So that's the first place. Second place, I'll do an illustration here. Sorry, getting out of your field of vision there. So now I'm getting a bit older. I'm discovering that there's these really weird soft drinks out there that I never tried as a child. I don't know if you ever tried these as a child and hated them, and now you're old, they suddenly aren't so bad anymore. Soda water and tonic water. Am I right? Like, it's like no kid ever drinks these, but you go to an older person's house and suddenly they're in the fridge. Like, what was the day that suddenly that became an option? It just did. Like, the salty water tastes good now. I don't know how that happened. Sometimes when we're facing a big decision, it's like we're trying to choose between 2 bottles of water, right? 2 bottles of different drinks, 2 pretty average ones, to be perfectly honest. And we look at soda water and think that goes really well with cordial, but we look at tonic and that goes really well with gin, and we're trying to decide how depressed am I feeling today. When it comes to making decisions, sometimes we, by digging deep into ourselves, we can discover 2 of the options that are out there, right? Here's another verse from Proverbs, and here's what I want to tell you. Where there is no guidance, the people fall, but in abundance of counselors, there is victory. One of the things I notice that my wife does with her friends is they send photos of each other in different outfits for criticism. For encouragement. I don't know what it is. Some mixture of those 2 things. And Beck and I are probably going to have a crack at renovating soon, and we're going to ask lots of opinions on bathrooms. We're just going to ask that, because we have no idea about any of that stuff. Because we ask for the opinions of others on all sorts of trivial things, let's be honest. Things that don't really matter in the scheme of things. But on really big things, how often do we not ask anyone? Like, what job should I do? Should I start that job? Should I leave that job? Should I marry that person? Should I have children? Should I buy that house? Should I move to that place? Like, big life decisions, how often we kind of keep that private and think that we can figure that out, but on such trivial matters, we're happy to invite the opinions of everyone. What the Bible is saying here is that sometimes you need an abundance of counselors. You need to ask the opinions of other wise people. And they might say, you think these are your only options. You're wrong. There's actually more options that you weren't even aware of. You thought this was all you could choose from, but because you asked me, I can tell you about other options that you didn't even know existed. Ones that are objectively better than the 2 that you thought you had. Some that will affect your body in really strange ways. There is something about asking others that allows you to see things that you could not see for yourself. Be careful though, because they've chosen a deliberate word there. It's not say the abundance of anyone there is victory. There's a quality about the people you ask that's important. It's almost like a title, isn't it? A counselor. Someone has a clue. Who are the people in your life that have a clue that you invite into the harder decisions of your life? Because apparently, victory can be found there. I look at the room and I proudly see some people with more grey hairs than I have. There is only one person in this room, and I don't know who it is, but there's one of them who there's no one older than. But every other person, there is someone in this room older than you, right? Someone who has more experience than you have. Have you invited them into the big questions and decisions of your life? Because God says, I want to speak to you about how to find wisdom. Dig deep into yourself. Dig deep into smart, experienced people who've been there before. Go find some counselors, because you might just find some answers. You might just find some options that you didn't really know even existed. And third, so first dig into yourself. There's actually wisdom there. It's built into you. It's deep. It's hard to get to. It can be found. 2, there's wisdom in other people too, strangely enough. Find those people. If you have no one in your life that is wiser than you are, you need to get some more friends. I can't remember who it was. I can't remember. One of those leadership guru type books, but it said, aspire to be the dumbest person in the room. Like, there is wisdom in that, right? Finding people who have a bit more of a clue. And I'm telling you, this room is full of people who have a clue. Third place, logical one. I probably should have begun here, but we're going to do our third point here, is obviously go to God. See, when it comes to giving wisdom, let's read the verse. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who generously gives to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. God is very liberal with giving out wisdom. It is like JobKeeper on steroids. If you give any sniff of a job that was affected, you get some. Okay, you can have some wisdom. It's there for you to have. If you're after it, ask God for it, and he says he will give it to you. The follow-up verse, which I haven't got here, but I'll badly paraphrase it for you. So just kind of be careful if you ask, though, because if you ask, he might tell you, and then you'll have to wrestle with whether to do it or not, and that's really awful. Like when God kind of gives you the insight and then you don't follow through, it's like that's going to be painful. That's not a fun place to be in. But the point here, of course, being that if you are looking for wisdom, God is happy to give it out. Maybe the reason you don't know what to do is because you have been too afraid to genuinely ask God. Been too afraid to expose the full rawness of who you are and why this decision is such a big deal to you and invite God into it. But if you want to find out, God's saying, I'm happy to give. I'm happy to give. On some, where we've already talked about ways to listen to God, I think apply these practices. Any of the, go back and they're still on YouTube, I'm pretty sure. Go check it out. It's the 7 ways. Spend some time, do the business with God, ask for him to show you wisdom, and he says he will. And it's a pretty big call. Maybe it's what you need. So if we go back to kind of where we started, next slide for me, Carlos. Be careful how you live. Don't be careless, not as unwise, but as wise. Making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. There's one last thing I want to say about this whole concept of when faced with a decision, just do the wise thing. Maybe ask yourself the question, what's the wise thing to do? And do that. I reckon if I was to talk to all the people I know, myself included, when life has kind of ended up in a place we didn't want it to go and we try and retrace our steps, it probably is directly related to us not asking what is the wise thing to do, and probably more likely related to the other questions we asked instead. I hear people ask the question, what do I want to do? Or what would feel good? Or what can I do so I can avoid having to make a decision? The questions that we're asking in that moment, I think, are a great reflection of where the possibilities are that we might go. And I challenge you, I suppose, as you face these situations, to say, okay, I'm going to add to my question list, not just, is this going to be fun? Is this going to be fun? Is this going to be an enjoyable experience? Adding to the list, is this the wise thing to do? I just think of the moments in people's lives where they've suddenly ended up in a place where they didn't want to be. And it was always related to decisions that were made along the way. And at no point are we asking, what would the wise thing to do be? Because you're often faced with situations where they're both right. There's no like a wrong and a right one. So the question isn't, is it right? Or the question isn't, is it not wrong? The question is it wise? And I think there's another final illustration for what wisdom actually looks like in practice. About 2 years ago, my family got to go to New Zealand for a holiday. It was the first long service leave I've ever used in my life for a holiday. It was awesome. Went to New Zealand, can't wait. I'll show you a photo at some point and you'll want to go too. It's a beautiful country. And on one afternoon, my wife and I got to go for a walk, which is nice. And we came across this sign here for Bob's Cove Track. Here we are, faced with a situation where we have to make a decision. Do we go left? Do we go forwards? Do we go the long one? Do we go the short one? And so faced with this great decision, I asked what the wise thing to do would be, and I picked the one, and then I got back in the car and went back to the hotel. Sometimes I think we think wisdom is picking the right road. That's not how the Bible describes wisdom. We narrow it down to a life choice, to a life moment. But wisdom isn't a life moment. Wisdom isn't a life choice. Wisdom is more of like a lifestyle. There's a cracker of a verse here. If you go to whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered. So when you pick the road, like that list of Bob's Cove tracks, there's not a bad one on them. What's the key choice to make? Actually walk one of them. Like you've got to actually walk one of them. And the wisdom is found by continuing to walk, by keeping on walking. Because I know that tomorrow, for some of us, walking to work, walking through our hours is going to be awful. Because we're going to be in a mask trying to talk to people, and it's a horrific experience. And by about 12 o'clock, we have this new experience. We have face sweat, where we're all sweaty here, but everywhere else is cold. And so I feel hot and cold at the same time, and it's really frustrating. And the wisdom is not in, am I going to wear a mask or not? The wisdom is, am I going to walk this over time? Am I willing to actually walk this journey? Wisdom is a walk. Because if you walk it, you might just end up here. Next slide for me here. This is, that picture there is the end of the Bob's Cove track. And it's beautiful. And here's some happy snaps of my wife and I when we were there. It's absolutely stunning. And by walking the wisdom, we were able to see something great. It's not at the sign that the wisdom shows up. It's at the walk that the wisdom shows up. I'm going to badly the Bible is mostly not narrative. But every now and again, there's a little narrative in there, a little story. And there's this cracker of a story in the book of Acts I'm going to paraphrase for you. It's this situation with Paul. He was an apostle. And basically what happened is he was in a ship, and he got a kind of vision from God that if you stay in this boat and they sail to that place, you're going to have a shipwreck. I think it's Acts 17. Don't quote me on that. Somewhere around there. And Paul's like, well, I don't get the decision. I'm not the captain, so we're just going to have to see how this goes. And sure enough, the captain's like, well, where are we going? So they went, and sure enough, hit massively bad waters, and the ship is in big, big trouble. And then Paul got this wonderful moment of clarity. Sometimes this is what you wish for, right? Like you're in a situation and you want God to give you what's going to happen. And an angel showed up to Paul and said, yes, you're in a shipwreck situation. Just as I said that would happen, sure enough, here we are, right? But you're going to live, and so is everyone else, because you're on the boat. And I need to save you because I've got a task for you. So it's all going to be good. Now, in a very rare moment, he got told exactly what's going to happen. Sometimes you wish for that, right? You wish you could just get given the angel show up and say, this is what's going to happen. Great, now I know. What happened next? I mean, you could read the story for yourself. The storm kept going. And Paul didn't go, hey, everyone, angel showed up. We're all good. Let's just sit down. Didn't. That's not how it happened. Because I know that's maybe how you want things to go. You're like, hard decision. God tell me, you told me. Cool, I know now, so I can just sit and wait. It's not like that at all. What happens is I'm not a nautical person, but this is a story that's told, right? I'll butcher it, I'm sure. Aaron probably could tell you a better version of it. He likes boats, I have no idea. But the waves were so bad that the weight of the boat was becoming a massive problem. And this is not a short journey. This is a long journey, right? They didn't know how long they were going to be stuck out in the middle of the Mediterranean. And so they took all the supplies of food and they scoffed as much as they could eat so that they knew they could live as long as they could, and then they tossed the rest overboard because they needed to keep the boat afloat because it was getting hairy and they needed to keep it light. They cut the life rafts free because they needed to keep the boat light. This is someone who knew the outcome. And the storm is still raging, and he is working his butt off to make this reality. Then they throw the anchors down to stop them casting out onto some rocks. Like, it looks like it's all over. And then suddenly they see in the distance a beach, and they think, oh, there's a beach there, but our anchors are in the ocean floor, and we can't get to the beach. And so they decide to cut the anchors at the perfect moment, and then the ship goes straight towards the beach and smashes on the beach. The boat is completely ruined, and they're all saved. And Paul knew that they would be saved. What sometimes we're looking for when we're asking for God's wisdom is we're asking for an easy road. That's not how it happens. No matter the road you're facing, no matter the walk of wisdom that you'll have to do, it's not going to be an easy walk, and you will have to be an active participant in making it happen. You might desperately wish that in those decision moments that God would just come and tell you what to do, and then you can go on easy autopilot. But that's not what the verse says. The verse says, be careful, the days are evil. You got to pay attention. You got to keep your hands on the steering wheel. You got to be an active participant, because even if God tells you what's going to happen, the way God works is you still have to play your part. There is no magical way that the world works where God tells you what to do and you can go on autopilot and it'll all be fine. The walk of wisdom is a hard walk. But if you want to hear God's voice about the decisions you got to make, you just got to keep on walking. When there's 3 good options, sometimes God's like saying, I don't really care which option you take, but pick one and walk it. Don't keep waiting, thinking, well, one of the signs will eventually be the right one. Pick one and start walking. I know it's a tough message. I appreciate that you're probably all going, wow, sweet. But on some level, God is saying to you, their answer can be found. It's in you, it's in your mates, and it's in God if you ask. You've just got to walk it. So I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray for wisdom in whatever the thing is you're looking for now. And if you are open to having God's wisdom bestowed upon you, I encourage you to open that up. All right, this might be a tough one, but here we go. Let's pray it out. God, we know that in a lot of ways, our life is the sum total of the decisions we make. Some of them are massive decisions on an individual day, but a lot of them are just the day-to-day decisions, the choices we make about how we live our life. The choice about whether or not we play on our phone from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock, or we actually engage with our kids and our wife. I say that to myself, to be perfectly honest. Our decisions are whether or not we get distracted or we choose to engage. Those decisions sometimes on a really small level, but the accumulated walk of those decisions will just dictate where we end up. And God, I pray that we would walk wisely. God, I know there are people here, I know it for myself, that there are people who have big decisions to make. A big call, a big issue, a big drama, a life direction, a risky choice that they're trying to weigh up. God, you say, if anyone lacks wisdom, ask and you'll give it. So we are boldly asking today, God, for in that situation, you would make your wisdom known. That you would give us the bravery to dig deep into ourselves so we can truly understand why we're afraid. We can truly understand what we need and what we're after, and maybe why we're putting too big a deal on this thing. Why maybe that we're putting too much meaning in it and we're not getting enough meaning out of you, God. Let us do that work on ourselves to find out what we're deeply made of, how you've deeply made us. God, give us the bravery to find someone else, to expose the difficulties that we have. We want to be proud and pretend that we know all of the right things to do with our lives, but God, we don't have a clue. Our decisions that we're making is it's just us and our limited brain. And you say, God, don't just rely on your limited brain. There's lots of brains. Use them. Invite wisdom into our life. God, I pray we'd be brave enough to do that. And God, I pray that we'd be brave enough to hear what you want us to do. And we'd be brave enough to start walking it. First couple of steps are probably going to be the hardest. But the good thing about steps is that steps don't take you too far. Like you can take 10 steps and turn around and go back and pick the other path. That's not a huge call. The huge call is you just got to start. You've got to start walking. The call isn't to make the right decision now so that in 10 years' time everything will be fine. That's a decision that's too heavy a weight to carry. But we can make a decision for the next 5 steps now, God. I pray we'd be brave enough to keep walking wisely. We will do the wisdom walk. Whatever we're in, we think, okay, here's our pathways, here's the walk. I'm going to start walking that one. It looks good to me. my friends, the wise people in my life, it looks like it's okay. Let's just start walking it with you, God, and we'll see where this takes us. And I can turn around if I have to, but I just want to walk it now. God, I pray we'll not be so unable to take those steps. Give us the bravery to start walking, because that's where the wisdom is found. Let us be sensitive to you as we do it. Let us keep finding opportunities to hear from you. You want to give us wisdom, God. I pray we'll hear it. I pray we'll put it into practice. In your name, amen. Amen. Amen.
Thanks so much, Michael, and thank you to everyone for joining us this week. Please make sure you jump on lifepoint.org.au. We've got great information on our church website about different small groups you can get in contact with, events happening in the life of our church, and all the different programs we run and ministries here. There's something for everyone. The link is in the comments below. Subscribe to this channel, stay in touch with us. We love having you join us. Have a great week, everyone.